Welcome to the Uplift, where we are uplifting our lives, uplifting each other, and uplifting our communities together. Thank you for joining myself, Cy Herrera, and Tessa Savala here, two women, two attorneys, doing it our way, and inviting you here each week to share in on the stories, advice, and life lessons we've picked up along our journeys that keep us uplifted, and that will hopefully do the very same thing for you. Now buckle in and let's get ready to be uplifted.
Hello and welcome. As always, I am Tessa and I'm joined by the lovely and brilliant Cy.
Thank you. Hello, Tessa. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
So today on my mind, I've been thinking about how, at least in social media, there's kind of this backlash against optimism that I don't know that if people think it's illogical or that they think it's just for the naive. And I find that frustrating because I am very much optimistic and I don't think of myself as naive or unrealistic. And then I saw this tweet from Adam Grant and he talks about informed optimism. And I thought it was really interesting because I don't think people understand the degrees of optimism. And so let me read it. Informed optimism doesn't mean you only look at the bright side. It means you don't overlook the bright side. If you won't see possibility, you can't solve problems. If you can't imagine a best case, you don't make things better. The greatest antidote to fear is grounded hope. And so I think about this and I think, wow, genius, one, because I don't think optimism is this kind of like naive, blind view of the future where everything is all rosy. I think it is this idea that you're choosing that good things can't happen to you and good things can happen in this world. And I think we see it in the good parts that we see in the news, even though we're bombarded by all this negativity every day about, the drama in every news headline about whether it's the economy or the pandemic or the general state of the environment. What do you think of, Cy, when you think about choosing optimism rather than either denying it or choosing what I think people think is realism, but I often think it's just negativity where they assume everything doesn't work out? What works for you? And
I think that there are a lot of different dynamics at play when you talk about this subject that often, get coded when you are discussing it. And one of the first things I think about it actually is power and whether or not people have the power to make change, right? And if you believe that if someone is able to convince you, whether that be, greater society, whether it be, your inner circle, whether it be your inner demons, that you cannot do it, then you cannot do it. You do not have the power to do it because you've already decided against it, right? So I think that this is actually very steeped in power, and how much power we have and how much power we believe we have as individuals and as a collective. And so I think it's a very important topic. That's the other thing about optimism is that I think in media often it's portrayed as like this little quirk, this little quirky personality trait, right? Like, oh, you're so smiley and optimistic, and I think that it has personally real life consequences, not just for us as individuals, but us as, our community, as our family, as our, as our society, for the people that need us, for the people that are often disempowered. And so I think it's an extremely important topic for that reason. I think that when you change minds, you can change the world, as corny as that might sound. I mean, I think it's very true. I mean, just look at history and how many people, I'm obsessed with cults right now. I've been watching all of these cult shows over the spring.
I did not think we would get to cults so quickly, but this is great.
Right? I know, but I mean, it's very connected because, the cult will actually play on, people who want to think differently. For better or worse, and oftentimes worse, people can be led to believe anything, honestly. I mean, that's one of the lessons of a cult, right? But the other lesson is that people feel like they don't have power in our society, and here's somebody telling them that they do. And I think that's really interesting too. On the other side of things, I mean, when people organize and they believe that something can happen, I mean, just think about all of the amazing examples that we can pull from history of the civil rights movement, of the farm workers movement, of the voting rights movement, the women's liberation movement. All of these groups had to come together around an idea of something that did not seem achievable, right? So in
And something
general,
that was
like that,
better than
yeah.
the status quo.
Yes, absolutely. And something that seemed impossible, frankly. Something that
Right.
seemed impossible at the time. And so without optimism, I mean, I think first and foremost, we have to understand without optimism, you are literally perpetuating the status quo. Always. You can't possibly think that something is going to change for the better if you don't have optimism, right? Optimism, I love this quote. I love this quote because this quote says, you don't see optimism as just basically being completely pie in the sky, things that we're accused of all the time, like being pie in the sky, completely unrealistic, something that could never happen. That's not optimism. Optimism is seeing something that should change, that should happen, and believing that if we do enough, it will happen. And I think that is a very powerful thing to choose to believe in because we've seen over and over again that it works.
It's fascinating that you bring up the power dynamic in it. I hadn't really given it much thought, but you're absolutely correct. The people in power would not want those, I guess, shall we say, underneath their level of power to see optimism, because that would change. It would change the status quo. It would change how we see the world, because it's so easy to see the world as a bunch of problems and not see the world as a bunch of opportunities. I think is what optimism allows you to see, because you can see the bright side, and even situations that look grim to others.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, when you have been systemically pushed down, discouraged, and decidedly made to feel like you are not worthy, those are all tactics in making sure that the status quo is preserved. And so I didn't mean to make it all political, but at the same time, it is real. And I think that, if you think about it in terms of, you can think about it in terms of, class and race and all of those things, those political terms. You could also think about it in terms of just literally individuals. I always think about my background in intimate partner violence and that whole psychology of things. And, that is the number one thing is to control and manipulate, really. And if you can control someone's mind, you control them, and it's the most powerful tool there is. And so I think that as individuals, there's so many things at play when it comes to this, including, fear of rejection, fear of, failure, all these F words, just all of these fears about not being able to do something that you might get an idea should happen, that really hold us back. But I also think that people play on that hard. People play on it in individual relationships. People play on it in communities and families and the greater society and greater media. And I think this is why, because it is actually a really strong, powerful tool. Optimism is so much more than just smiles and rainbows and personality quirks. It's so much more than that, right? And I think that's the thing is, like, people don't want to, people don't want you to know your true power, and that's what we're here for, is to make sure that people do, because it can be life changing, it can be world changing if we really, if we really, really harness the power of optimism.
And I think about the power dynamics angle. And I don't think of it as only as political. It could be, a parent to a child. It could be a
Mm-hmm.
teacher to a student. It could be
Yeah.
a religious figure to one
Mm.
of their patrons. I don't know. I am too far outside
Followers,
of
yeah.
organized. There you go. Doesn't have to be a cult. Could be an organized religion that is perfectly well observed in the United States or
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere. Power isn't limited to politics. It's our daily lives. It's the
Absolutely.
manager to his employee. It's the
Mm.
mother to her child. And the
100%.
idea that those
Absolutely.
people in places of power find it, you know, they obviously want to hold on to their control of the rules that they've established. But at the same time, when they're doing so, what they say and what they do, I think it gets embedded in people so that they
Mm.
start putting limits on themselves, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
when you start putting those limits on a person, that person then starts questioning their abilities. And I think that chips away at optimism, right? Because you're not seeing yourself as your best self. You are only hearing about the problems and the limits and
Mm-hmm.
the concerns that others
Yes.
have about you. And
Yes.
that's I think, a hard system to break out of because it affects your life in perpetuity and it affects how you achieve, goals. It affects how you perceive goals and your ability to attain them. And, it affects your ability to reach the next level in relationships or employment or whatever it may be. That's, what you want to see yourself in 5 years or the like. And it's hard to get out of that. It's hard to get out of the limits that have been placed on you and you have like ingrained in yourself. But I think thinking about things like this and realizing it's a societal and systemic issue helps us understand that it is okay to think outside that box and that it's just a system that exists. And within us, we have all the opportunities and the abilities to see the best for ourselves because why shouldn't we see the best? Why shouldn't we think good things can happen? Why couldn't this be the time that everything does work out? And why do we sit there and wonder, well, it's not going to work out, as opposed to, this is awesome, this is going to work out? I'm thinking about how challenging it is to break out of the limits that we place on ourselves, and mostly because they have been placed upon us and we don't realize it consciously, that we then transfer. Say, the teacher who says you talk too much in class, does that then make you withhold opinions later in life? Does it
Mm.
make you quiet when you're in a business meeting with clients and your boss? Does it change your ability to raise your opinion in a college setting classroom? Think about the impact that it kind of snowballs, and it affects
Mm.
your confidence and your ability to move forward and how you see ability to do well in a class or your ability to do well in a job or your ability to handle relationship challenges well. Just because maybe
Absolutely. Yeah.
once a teacher told you to be quiet or your parents said you question too many things or whatever it may be, those things stick
Oh,
with you,
yes.
right?
Oh,
Even if
yes.
even if the person in power or the authority figure in that situation said something that wasn't intended to stick with you, it can, and it does.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
seeing the way around that and not putting the limits on yourself, I hope is what we can bring to everybody, because I know I'm guilty of it at times, and I think of myself as a generally optimistic person who thinks they can accomplish. Sometimes those things that have been said to you before, they linger and you don't think about how something can work out. And this will be the time it does work out. Because why are we sitting around wondering a lot of the times, oh, it's just not going to work out?
Mm.
Think about spending your time doing that as opposed to
Yeah.
spending your time thinking about how it could work out.
Right. Right. And two things there. One is the intergenerational element that you talked about. I think that that is fascinating because I mean, yes, in your individual life, you're being fed signals over and over again on whether or not, you are, I mean, unfortunately, people think about it kind of as a dichotomy or black and white of you're either good or bad, or you're successful or you fail, or you're a winner or you're a loser. And first of all, first and foremost, we should all understand that that is just not the case. Nobody is, one thing.
Yeah.
We're human beings that have a set of experiences. We have opportunities to grow and to change and frankly, failure. We should reject the idea of failure because, you have to fail to succeed. It's literally just part of it. And so, all of that, I think, especially when you're young, I don't think people have found a great way to translate it, or just not on the mainstream, found a great way to translate to children that, this is all okay. This is just part of it. I think children especially, or young people especially, they see the world, and, I can't even think now with social media how they must see the world as just, people being really successful and happy and wonderful and great and everything is perfect. And if you're not that, then you're nothing. You can very much fall into that trap. But the other thing that came out in my mind when you were speaking is that intergenerational piece of the person, the parent, passing on this sense of hopelessness to the child before the child even has a chance. And I think that's just really intriguing for me, and the fact that, yes, we all have these opportunities to get this input, and it might change how we see ourselves, and the opportunities in the world that are available to us. But if you have somebody who's already been through it, has already decided that the world is, just cool and there's nothing good, and they're never going to do anything great, and neither are you by extension. I can't imagine how that specific signaling, how powerful that is, to a child. And the second point that came to mind for me was about how much this is so entrenched in self-worth. It's, for me, entirely that it's whether or not somebody has the belief that they are worthy of good things happening to them, if they are worthy of these positive changes coming to them and to the world. And that self-worth is very much, obviously, entrenched and entangled in all of these experiences that you have and all of the signals that you receive, not just from your parents, but as you said, like your teachers, your peers, all of your life experiences. And really, most importantly, your perspective on things. Because,
Absolutely.
I mean, one of my favorite things to do is watch biographies, because the best thing about biographies is that it's always, a person that you revere, that you think is exceptional, that has, made it in some way or another. And you see their story, and it's a real life story. It's not fake. It's not fiction. It's not out of someone's mind. It's something that really happened to them. And 100% of the time, this person has experienced incredible adversity, incredible, if you want to characterize it this way, failures or shortcomings or challenges or trials and tribulations or whatever you want to call it. There were many, many times when they failed, and if they didn't, it wouldn't be a good story. So one of the things I like to tell people today is, just think about this as, this is your story, and it wouldn't be good unless you were going through all of this hard stuff right now. This is the good part. This is the interesting part. And this is where you overcome and go against all the odds and become the hero. So, it is so much, I think, based in whether or not you believe you're worthy of something better, that I think this optimism is just so intricately tied to self-esteem, actually.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it also, there's an element that is impacted by systemic sexism and systemic racism in, say, employment situations. When you think about how, I think the data has shown, as I white men in employment situations are viewed as what they can become, right? Or what their potential is, whereas most everyone else is viewed as what have they accomplished. And that's a big difference, right? Because that's on the people who are only viewed by their accomplishments, not what they can be, not what the opportunities for the company are with that person. And that's a problem, right? A huge
And
problem
how much
because
are we internalizing that?
mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, even well-meaning, have fallen into this just because it's society. And there's a lot of people who fight against it. And there's a lot of people who you might not think are on the side of, say, everyone else, the others. But it's easy to assume that the system will just continue to be the machine that eats up and spits out all the others. I like to think that there's a lot of change going on where people are starting to see the opportunities and the potential of everyone else.
Yeah, and also there is because of organized movements, I would say, there is an impetus now for us to challenge ourselves to really include everyone in the growth, right? Like, I think that there has always been this, frankly, just like kind of a cutthroat culture in our capitalist society of, it doesn't matter if you started, 500 years behind. It doesn't matter. It's just, you're in this race now and, winner takes all type of thing. And now there's just been a little shift, but a really important shift, where people are starting to say, wouldn't it be beautiful if everyone had the same opportunities to grow, to succeed, to achieve, to attain whatever skill set or whatever, not just position, but opportunity, and that there's value there in all people with all these different perspectives and backgrounds, and seeing the value in what people have to offer, I think is so interesting in that it is literally just, again, a mindset. People didn't change. People's opportunities didn't change. Structural racism sure did not change yet. What changed was people's perspective on the world and perspective on what people have to offer, and that it has value. That's all. And that's amazing.
It's the ability to see the best case scenario in everybody. And I like to think it's that work of all that, of all the activists that created this effect where people see the data now and people are paying attention to the data and they realize, hey, that data can look better. And whether or not they want it to look better because they actually believe or they want it to look better because they think it's best for their stock value, I'm of the opinion, I don't care what their motivation is.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Right. If it starts helping other people, that's okay by me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, built into that, the thing that's beautiful about it is if it's better for their stockholders and their value in their company, that means,
which it is, that the data says.
Right. That means why? Why is it? Because there has been a tipping point and that the public sees this as important, right? And the public is watching and the public is informed and the public has these values. That in itself is something to be excited about. That is a big deal. And it, capitalism is going to be capitalism in my mind. And that's okay, to your point, in the fact, in this regard, and that if the public is paying attention and holding people to account, then that's a good sign. That's a good sign for society. Will it work overall for whatever our, stated goals are, what have you? Who knows? But, it is a good sign that again, that's power. That's actually power. Like we were talking about in the beginning, the people who, started this movement, re-energized this movement, picked up that torch, or are carrying the torch today, they could have said, the corporations are too big and powerful and greedy, and they don't care about people, and we're never going to make any change. And even if we did all of this, what is it? What are we actually going to get? And I feel like that's actually, in a real life example, very much the way that the media will frame a lot of things. I think that, the civil rights movement came out with a lot of great concrete, changes or successes, if you will. But it was not, I'm sure at the time, it wasn't all neat and nice, and it still isn't. I don't think it ever was. But when people go back in history, they like to kind of put a bow on everything and package it in this way. Oh, this happened and then that happened and it was a result and it was linear. And, it really wasn't. I don't believe that. I believe that everything is very much, I'm frankly just messy and everyone's trying to figure it out and everyone is fighting really hard and doing everything that they can and using different tactics and just trying to make it work, because no one's going to tell you how to do it. No one's going to tell you the answers. But today, people are doing things because it's so urgent and it's so necessary. And that's it. It doesn't have to be, oh, we're going to get this kind of return on our investment of activism in this quarter, right? Like, that's not the way that people organizing are thinking, which is good because they're responding to very real needs. They're responding to very real things in people's lives, and it is paying off in a way that maybe we would have never imagined or even stated, right? And so that I think is incredible and an incredible example of optimism. Without optimism, without believing that something good can happen, even if it's not concrete, it's still powerful. It's still powerful to believe that something good will come of this. And to the point that you have raised in this topic, optimism is 100% a choice of seeing that there is something that, can happen, something good that can come out of this, regardless of how hard it might be or how many barriers there might be, how many obstacles you might have to overcome. Just believing that it's important to keep going and to start and to do and to act because there's something to work towards. That is, I think, the very seed that is really the beginning of every movement, whether it be internal or external.
And I think, we should also acknowledge that even though we're seeing these great movements on kind of like a societal level where doing the right thing, seeing the good, seeing the bright side, seeing the best case scenario for businesses and for how they treat others, and whether it be their supply chain or their employees or their management or other companies or the environment or their communities. These are all great things, but there can still be cases where, the mother says to the child or the teacher says to the student or the employer says to the employee or the, partner says to their partner, I don't like it when you do X, and that just becomes ingrained, and that can still affect someone's ability to be optimistic because they have placed these limits on themselves that whatever negative trait has been raised against them is too great that they can't see beyond it, and that could limit their potential or their ability to see the best case. And you think about how sometimes what we say can impact somebody's confidence and their ability to see themselves in the future, even if we didn't intend it to be that way.
Right.
Words matter.
What would you do, Tessa, if a friend came to you and just, shared that kind of experience? Like, what could you do to uplift someone who has been through that kind of thing recently? I mean, I could tell you that, I don't know, maybe a few years back, early 30s maybe, I distinctly remember being shushed, and I did not like that. And, in a professional setting, and I never see myself as anything but equal to all of my colleagues, regardless of our titles. And so, I was very taken aback. I was very offended. But I mean, how do you lift somebody? Are there any tools to uplift somebody in that case where they are feeling the weight of that kind of discouragement, and maybe, on the verge of internalizing that kind of message. How can we fight against that?
I think it's remembering that it is that person's opinion about the situation and about how they feel about the situation, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you or your actions. It's about how they see the world. And it's a hard thing to realize sometimes, that it is on them and it's not on us. I think that's one way to handle it. The other one is just to know that your self-worth is not based on how other people see you. It's based on how you see yourself.
And what my grandma would say is, they're just jealous. And I will hold on to that.
I love that.
I will hold on to that one too, always. But I mean, you really do. You really have to find something to keep you strong and to keep you grounded in who you are and your self-worth. Truly, truly. Like, I think this is such an important part of it, because if somebody is able to shake your very foundation of not just who you are, but what you are worthy of, with these kind of snide comments, when oftentimes, and probably all of the time, like you just pointed out so brilliantly, is has to do so much more with them than it has anything to do with you. If you can take that perspective, it is life-changing. I can tell you that somebody that I'm close to, I've seen the change. I've seen the perspective shift in them now, where they were essentially neurotic, to be honest. Like, everything that somebody said, they would internalize immediately, and they would counteract, and they would, act out and lash out back because they were so hurt by it. But now they've gotten into the habit. And I think that's another important point, is that it is a habit that you can form. When somebody says something like that, give yourself just a little tick, give yourself a little breath, give yourself a little moment, take a beat, and decide to remember that this is probably about them. And if you just challenge yourself to think that in the moment, and you always do that, and just entertain that idea. You don't even have to accept it right out. I mean, just literally just give yourself a moment to think, I wonder if this is about them. Be curious about it. Could this be about them and not me? It can become a really powerful tool and perspective that you can incorporate in your life, where nothing will be able to touch you anymore. And it's really exciting to see the change when it happens. So I encourage everyone to try to implement that practice, because it is something that can be learned. It is something that can be adopted as a habit, and it can definitely change your outlook and really protect you from internalizing other people's negativity.
Absolutely. I found that it's very helpful to surround yourself with people who see not only the best in you, but see the best in themselves, right? When you're surrounded by people who are negative and place limits on themselves, it impacts you.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes a hard decision to make, especially in your, say, late 20s, early 30s, and you're trying to create that advisory board, or even just your normal everyday friends. Surrounding yourselves with people who aren't full of, I guess I'm going to say, negativity. It's a big choice, right? Because you don't need those voices when you're dealing with so many things and trying to protect yourselves from, the negative side comment from your coworker or whomever it may be that could impact you.
Absolutely.
And doing that house cleaning is important.
Yes, especially when you acknowledge the fact that the people who you surround yourself with and their perspectives and their voices become your internal voice. They become your internal dialogue. It might not be something that you want. It might be something that you actively try to work against, but the truth is it's going to seep in, and you owe it to yourself, to create peace in your own mind and heart. And that's really one of the key ways to do it. It's just human psyche, right? Like it's just human nature. And so that's why sometimes I just stop watching the news. I just won't do it because I really realize, like, I start getting a little bit like just paranoid about danger and just, death and like all of this dark stuff. And I'm like, where is this even coming from? Nothing is happening in my life that, why are these thoughts occurring? And, practice of meditation and understanding how to not entertain those dark thoughts is extremely important. But also just kind of doing a little like palate cleansing and feeding yourself good stuff is really important. And I mean, it doesn't have to be serious. It could literally be as simple as listening to happy music. I have a morning playlist that's all about gratitude and optimism, because that's what I want to put in my mind and body. And it really makes a difference. I mean, it might sound, trivial, but it really does, because you're not only putting the words in your head, but you're putting the spirit of the music in your body, in your, I don't even have a word for it, but like in your aura, and so definitely, I would just recommend to everyone, surround yourself with as much positivity as you can, because I know for me, I feel like I have like some empathetic type of, tendencies. I definitely pull from the energies around me. And if you're like that, it's even doubly important for you to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with strong, positive vibes, for sure.
I saw something on social media, it's this time of the year of the new year changing, where people were recommending writing down one positive thing or something you are proud of every day, putting it on a piece of paper. So at the end of the year, you can see all these good things that happen to overshadow like all
I love that
other stuff that happened. And I'm like, that's not bad. Even thinking about it just on that like day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis, that kind of reminder of the good stuff that does happen. It's so important, right? To know that good things are happening to you and recognizing that. And I think because we are bombarded by so much like negativity in the world, that reminder that the good is happening to us and to others is important and crucial to silence kind of that negativity.
The practice of gratitude. I cannot overemphasize the power of gratitude. Absolutely. Whenever I am feeling a certain way, feeling down, feeling even just lethargic, whatever, or if I'm experiencing that with somebody else, if somebody else is feeling that way and I'm trying to pull them out of that, that is my go-to. I'm just, tell me one thing you're grateful for, like one little baby step, one thing. And it is really powerful. I just have to say that it is really powerful to see somebody coming from almost like despair of just like the world is so, terrible. And everything is bad, to being like, well, this one thing is good. And there's a very powerful phenomenon in human psyche of wanting to be consistent, right? So if you say something out loud and it's not consistent with something else that you just said or what you're saying now, as far as your opinion, the human psyche is very much about, let's keep it looking good on the consistency side. And so your brain actually tries to find ways to match what you're saying. So if you can get somebody to say out loud, this is a great uplift opportunity, I think. If somebody is feeling really down in your life, sometimes people need to just feel their feelings, and that's okay. But one good thing to do before you leave them is to just say, even one thing. Can you name one little thing, any little thing that you're grateful for today? And if they say that out loud, it has the power to change their mindset, not just for that moment, but really, if you can get into the practice of gratitude, maybe for their life, it really can be a big deal. So I think that's one of the things, that's definitely one of the tools I use very often in my little toolkit.
That is fascinating. Then my logical mind is kicking and thinking,
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't we want to see the world like that? Why wouldn't
Right.
we want to see ourselves like that? Why
Yeah.
wouldn't we want to see the best? Because what benefit does it bestow upon us as an individual to only see
Mm.
the crap out there? That's not
Mm-hmm.
helpful to us. It doesn't make us
Mm-mm.
happier. It doesn't make us feel better about ourselves or the people we love.
Mm-mm.
And so it
No,
makes
but
you go
it can
ahead.
benefit somebody is my thought. And so yeah, I think I love your logic brain. Like that's exactly why it's so important for us to, you know, really help guide other people that don't see the value in optimism, because if you can show them the way of, first off, that they're worthy. I mean, that's another thing
Mm-hmm.
that I use all the time. I just, whatever people are feeling in regards to the negativity about themselves, especially, I like to just counter it and head on and tell people, hey, you're worthy of love. You're worthy of attention. You are worthy of this life. You are worthy of opportunity. You are worthy of that new thing that you want, in your life. Like, just saying it out loud, it might be the first time that anyone's given them permission to think that. So,
You know, it's interesting
state
you
it.
say that. I use the what advice would you give to somebody that you
Mm-hmm.
love?
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that oftentimes the advice that somebody who is in this kind of like limited negative space will give to somebody else that they love is much more
Mm,
optimistic and much
mm.
more filled with hope than they are putting on themselves.
And
And then
it's
you
so
just allow
powerful.
them to that, yeah,
Yeah,
because
no,
they
that's a
realize
really
that,
powerful tool, because they won't do it for themselves because there's a self-worth issue there.
yep,
They believe that their best friend is worthy, but they don't
mm-hmm,
believe that they are worthy. And you're really getting at that without having to, hit it right on the nose. And that is an incredible exercise of empathy, right? That they're not giving themselves. So I love that
yeah.
too. But yeah,
And
so
I
I
think
mean,
as always, it
go ahead.
varies person to person, right?
Hmm.
Like what works for one doesn't necessarily work for another. And I
Right.
think both of
Right.
these techniques are super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that at the end of the day, you know, it really is a matter of choosing optimism. I think that you're going to get, if you choose to walk through life in an optimistic way, you're going to get a lot of people that will be naysayers. You're going to get a lot of people that are going to try to tear you down from there. And you got to ask yourself why, first of all. But,
Hmm.
again, to Tessa's great advice, it has a lot to do with them and all of the stuff that we've been talking about, all the signals that they've been given in their lives, their self-esteem and where it's at. Um, but I think that the most important reason to be optimistic, one of them at least, is actually to inspire people out of that. I think so many people have been, beaten down emotionally in a way that um, it's really unfair to them, especially when it's something that happens in childhood primarily, right? Or in their youth. And so if you are uh, privileged enough and had the benefit enough to find yourself in a place where you are secure, where you have strong self-esteem, where you have confidence, where you have optimism, share that with other people in a way that really just brings them to the light, because until people can see themselves standing in the light with you, they'll never join you. So I just challenge everyone to, you know, find people in those moments of kind of, despair and darkness, and just bring them a little bit closer, have them join you in the light. I think if we all did that, we could do anything. I mean, frankly, literally, that's optimism right there. I mean, we could do whatever we want. It's a matter of believing first.
Absolutely. And I will remind everyone to do that for yourself too. See
Hmm.
the best in yourself. Think of the limits that you place on yourself and ask yourself at every step, am I limiting myself? because we may not be doing it consciously, but we could be doing it subconsciously. So, really stop and think about whether or not you have placed those limits on yourself, not because you intended to, but because it just kind of happened. And then choose to see the good.
Yes, choose to see the good and always challenge negativity. I think that's the other thing is like a lot of times the negative is a very strong energy and it's very easy to just take it and internalize it. So just be very suspicious of negativity and instantly challenge it. Like just that should be your go-to. Challenge it. Be critical of it. Try to figure out, or don't even figure it out. Just reject it if it makes most sense to you in your life. But never accept negativity because people are willing to give it for free, left and right. And I know that it probably resonates with so many of you listening, but if you really just take one step back and look at it again, it is going to be about that person, their experiences, their limited focus and perspective on life. And that has nothing to do with you. And frankly, anyone's opinion of you is none of your business, is what I always like to say. And so if you can avoid that, that's a good place to start. If you have to hear it, be very suspicious of it because each of us, no matter who you are, no matter what you've been through, each and every one of us deserves to live a full happy life. I mean, every one of us deserves to pursue our own happiness, our own goals, how we see ourselves in the best form. And so, let's just continue to lift ourselves and each other up to our highest potential. I think that optimism is such a key cornerstone of that.
I think we've come full circle, and I want to remind ourselves about part of this tweet that we started with that said, if you can't imagine a best case, you don't make things better.
Absolutely.
So let's all start imagining the best case for ourselves and for others.
I am with you, Tessa. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's take on the world. What are we doing next?
That's right. Absolutely. Well, let's think about what we're doing next and make sure it's the best case to make things better. 100%. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you so much for being part of this beautiful community. We are so grateful to have you. We'll see you next time.